You probably know Missouri for its rivers, small towns, and rolling countryside. But there is a darker side most people never see. Hidden across the state are towns that were erased by floods, war projects, and deadly mistakes. Places where entire communities vanished and were never rebuilt. In this video, we are uncovering 13 real ghost towns in Missouri that you probably don't know about. So, stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a story of danger and loss that you'll never forget. So hit subscribe, and let's begin at Number 13. Phoenix, Greene County. In northwest Greene County sits the ghost town of Phoenix. What began in 1884 as a limestone discovery during railroad blasting quickly turned into one of Missouri's most important quarry towns. By 1905, Phoenix became the home of the Phoenix Marble Company. Stone pulled from this quarry, known as Napoleon Gray, gained national recognition. It was polished and shipped across the country, which was used in major landmarks like the Missouri State Capitol in Jefferson City and the New York Stock Exchange Trading Room. Phoenix was built as a true company town. The quarry owners controlled nearly everything. They provided the homes, the store, the schoolhouse, and the church. Workers were paid in company script that could only be spent locally. At its peak, the Missouri Bureau of Geology described the Phoenix Quarry as the largest and best equipped in the state, employing more than 500 men. Then the demand disappeared. The Great Depression slowed construction nationwide, cutting deeply into the quarry's business. During World War II, much of the heavy machinery was dismantled and scrapped for the war effort. After the war, ownership changed, but the town never recovered. By the 1970s, Phoenix was nearly empty. Today, the town is mostly hidden beneath trees along Sugar Creek. Abandoned quarry buildings, collapsed homes, and scattered foundations still cling to the land. Number 12. Melva, Taney County. Hidden in the Ozark Hills of southern Missouri, once stood a small railroad town called Melva. In the early 1900s, trains passed through daily. Families built homes near the tracks, and life moved at a steady, peaceful pace. Founded in 1906, Melva quickly became a tight community. It had a school, a church, and a handful of homes centered around the railroad. Most residents farmed or worked the tracks, and the town felt stable and permanent. Then, in the spring of 1920, everything ended. On March 11th, a powerful tornado tore directly through Melva. Nearly every building was destroyed. 11 people were killed, including 9 children. What remained was scattered debris and silence. The survivors tried to rebuild, but the town never recovered. Families moved away, and by 1931, Melva's post office closed, marking the end of the town. Today, Melva is gone. Forest and brush cover the land where homes once stood. Only faint traces of the old railroad bed and broken foundations remain, barely visible to those who know where to look. Number 11. Monarch Springs, Newton County. Monarch Springs lies approximately 5 miles east of Neosho in Newton County, Missouri. The town was named by combining Mo, Missouri, N, North, and Ark, Arkansas, after the Missouri and North Arkansas Railroad that served the area. The town grew around a natural spring and became a gathering spot for religious camp meetings. In August 1956, a large Church of God meeting brought hundreds of people from states across the country. Soon afterwards, a typhoid fever outbreak occurred. Investigators traced the outbreak to a contaminated well at the camp. 16 confirmed cases showed how vulnerable small towns could be when basic infrastructure failed. After the outbreak, the town slowly declined. With fewer visitors, the camp activities ended and residents moved away. Today, the area is part of a conservation zone, and the old town site is mostly overgrown. Monarch Springs remains a quiet reminder of how quickly social centers can vanish when health or infrastructure fails. Number 10. Old Pattonsburg, Daviess County. In the farmland of northern Missouri sits a town that lost a battle with the river it depended on. This is Old Pattonsburg, once a busy community along the Grand River, now frozen in silence. Pattonsburg was founded in the mid-1800s and grew quickly thanks to the river and the railroad. By the early 1900s, it had become one of Daviess County's busiest towns, filled with stores, schools, churches, and family farms. Life here revolved around the river, and for decades, it provided everything the town needed. Until it didn't. In the summer of 1993, historic flooding swept across the Midwest. The Grand River overflowed, broke through levees, and rushed into Pattonsburg. Homes and businesses filled with water. Streets turned into rivers. Dozens of families lost everything in a matter of hours. This time, the town made a different choice. Instead of rebuilding again, residents decided to leave. With federal assistance, the entire town was moved 2 miles north to higher ground. New homes, schools, and businesses were built, and Pattonsburg started over. The original town was left behind. Today, old Pattonsburg still stands, empty and decaying. Sidewalks crack beneath weeds. Houses collapse inward. Trees grow through old storefronts. It feels as if time stopped the moment the floodwaters came through. Number 9. Old Linn Creek, Camden County. Beneath the calm blue waters of the Lake of the Ozarks lies a forgotten town that once stood as the heart of Camden County. This is Old Linn Creek, a community that lived, worked, and dreamed right where boats now glide across the surface. Old Linn Creek was founded in the 1840s along the Niangua River. It became the county seat of Camden County and quickly grew into a busy river town. It had shops, a courthouse, schools, and quiet neighborhoods surrounded by forested hills. But in the late 1920s, plans for the Banyel Dam changed everything. The dam would create one of the largest man-made lakes in the United States, but it would also flood thousands of acres, including the entire town of Linn Creek. Residents were told they had to leave. But as construction finished in 1931, the lake began to rise, and soon the whole town was gone. Families packed up and moved to higher ground, building what's now known as New Linn Creek, just a few miles away. Meanwhile, the original town slipped quietly beneath the water, its homes, church, and courthouse swallowed by the lake. Today, Old Linn Creek still rests beneath the surface of Lake of the Ozarks. When water levels drop during droughts, some of the old stone foundations and streets can still be seen poking through the mud. Number 8. Cookeville, Pulaski County. Hidden inside what is now Fort Leonard Wood, once stood a quiet farming town called Cookeville. Long before soldiers trained here, this land belonged to families who worked it for generations. Cookeville began in the late 1800s as a simple agricultural settlement. Farms stretched across rolling hills, creeks supplied water for livestock, and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The town had a post office, a general store, and a few churches that anchored the community. Everything changed almost overnight in 1941. As the United States prepared for World War II, the government rushed to create a massive new military training base. The decision came fast, and so did the orders. Cookeville sat directly in the path of what would become Fort Leonard Wood. Families were given notices to leave. Farms were abandoned mid-season. Homes that had stood for decades were suddenly no longer considered permanent. Unlike towns that faded slowly, Cookeville ended in a matter of months. Today, Cookeville lies deep within restricted military land. Most of its remains are inaccessible, but historians believe foundations, wells, and road traces still sit beneath the forest, frozen in place, sealed behind barbed wire and history. I hope you are enjoying this video so far, so why not give it a thumbs up and share it with your fellows and family? It would mean a lot to us. Number 7. Bloodland, Pulaski County. Not far from Cookeville stood another small town, Bloodland. And while its fate was tied to the same military base, the loss here feels far more personal. Bloodland wasn't just farmland, it was family land. Founded in the late 1800s, Bloodland grew into a close-knit community where the same surnames appeared on mailboxes, church records, and gravestones for generations. Children walked dirt roads to school. Sundays meant church bells and shared meals. Then came 1941. When Fort Leonard Wood was approved, Bloodland was included in the land seizure. Families were told to leave properties that had been passed down for nearly a century. Some residents could relocate. Others never fully recovered from the loss. Homes were demolished. Roads vanished. But one thing remained: the cemetery. Today, deep within restricted military zones, Bloodland's cemetery still exists. Quiet, fenced, and rarely visited. Headstones stand where houses once did. For descendants, it's one of the only physical connections left to a town that no longer appears on any map. Number 6. Machens, St. Charles County. At the far eastern edge of Missouri's Katy Trail lies a nearly forgotten place called Machens. Once a busy river town in St. Charles County, today it is mostly empty fields and a few crumbling remains. Machens was founded in the mid-1800s along the Missouri River. Steamboats brought goods and passengers, and the town grew where trade and travel met. Later, the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad, known as the Katy Railroad, arrived, connecting Machens to St. Louis and beyond. For decades, the town thrived. Farmers shipped crops by train. Small shops served the community, and families lived along the tracks. But floods from the Missouri River slowly washed away the land, and when the railroad closed in the mid-20th century, residents began to leave. By the 1970s, Machens was nearly abandoned. The river reclaimed parts of the town, and nature grew over the streets and yards. Today, the Katy Trail starts here. Cyclists and hikers pass through every day, often unaware that a once thriving town lies beneath their feet. Number 5. Toonerville, St. Charles County. In the early 1900s, Toonerville was a small roadside community in St. Charles County. It wasn't wealthy or large, but it was stable. Farms, barns, and homes lined the countryside, and life followed familiar routines. That stability ended when war arrived. During World War II, the government selected the land around Toonerville for the Weldon Spring Ordnance Works, one of the largest munitions factories in the region. This facility wasn't symbolic. It produced TNT and high explosives at an industrial scale. Entire communities had to go. Toonerville was cleared, fenced, and transformed into a high-security explosives complex. Where families once lived, bombs were assembled. The land became dangerous, restricted, and volatile. After the war, the factory shut down, but the damage remained. Explosive residues, chemical waste, and contamination made the area unsafe for decades. The land was locked away until massive cleanup efforts finally stabilized it. Today, Toonerville's location sits inside the Weldon Spring Conservation Area. Trails pass through peaceful woods, but beneath the soil lies a violent past. Number 4. Howell, St. Charles County. Originally, Howell was a quiet farming settlement where families worked the land and lived simple lives. Like nearby towns, it was removed during the creation of the Weldon Spring Military Complex. But unlike others, Howell's land was reused for something far more dangerous. During the Cold War, the site became home to uranium processing operations. Radioactive materials were handled here under strict secrecy, and waste was stored with little understanding of long-term consequences. Over time, contamination spread into the soil and groundwater. This wasn't visible damage. There were no explosions or fires, just radiation, silent, invisible, and persistent. By the time the government acknowledged the danger, cleanup would take decades. Massive soil removal projects began, and entire sections of land were sealed or restricted. Today, Howell no longer exists as a town, but its legacy remains tied to nuclear history. Number 3. Hamburg, St. Charles County. Like its neighbors Howell and Toonerville, Hamburg was swallowed by the demands of war. But Hamburg was larger than both, and the loss here cut deeper. Founded in the mid-1800s along the Missouri River, Hamburg was a true working town. It had churches, schools, general stores, and families who had lived there for generations. This was not a temporary settlement. It was home. In the early 1940s, federal notices arrived. Hundreds of residents were ordered to leave, often with little time to prepare. Entire neighborhoods vanished almost overnight. Families scattered across Missouri, carrying with them more than lost houses. They lost a shared identity and a place that had defined their lives. When the war ended, the land was not allowed to heal. Hamburg's former footprint was later chosen for one of Missouri's most controversial cleanup projects. Radioactive waste from uranium processing was sealed inside a massive engineered disposal cell, built directly on the site. That structure still stands today. In a strange twist of history, the area is now open to the public. Visitors can hike to the top of the mound, standing above thousands of tons of radioactive waste, safely contained but permanently buried below. Few realize they are walking over the remains of a town that once had streets, homes, and generations of life. Hamburg is not just abandoned, it is entombed. Number 2. Arlington, Phelps County. Along the winding Gasconade River, hidden among the hills of Phelps County, once stood a town that thousands of travelers passed through without ever stopping. Its name was Arlington. Arlington began in the 1860s as a small river settlement called Little Piney. At first, it survived on fishing, trade, and the steady flow of river traffic. Then the railroad arrived. The St. Louis-San Francisco Railway put Arlington on the map, turning it into a growing stop between St. Louis and Springfield. Everything accelerated in the 1920s. When Route 66 cut directly through town, Arlington exploded with life. Motels lined the road. Diners stayed open late. Gas stations filled with travelers heading west in search of something better. A swinging bridge crossed the river, becoming a must-stop photo spot for families and road trippers. For a while, Arlington felt unstoppable. Then the traffic vanished. In the 1940s, Interstate 44 was built just far enough away to miss the town entirely. Cars no longer slowed down. Businesses closed one by one. Without travelers, Arlington had nothing left to hold on to. Flooding from the Gasconade River only finished what the highway had started. By the 1980s, Arlington was empty. The bridge was torn down. Motels collapsed. The last residents packed up and left, leaving silence where engines once roared. Today, Arlington still exists, but only if you know where to look. Number 1. Times Beach, St. Louis County. Just outside of St. Louis, along the Merrimack River, sits one of the most haunting ghost towns in Missouri. Times Beach is a place where hope and disaster collided, creating one of the darkest environmental tragedies in American history. Times Beach was founded in 1925 as a summer getaway for working-class families from St. Louis. For just $67.50, people could buy small riverfront lots and build simple cabins to escape the city heat. Summers were filled with picnics, swimming, and laughter. It felt safe. It felt peaceful. By the 1950s, many families began living there year-round. Dirt roads ran through town, neighbors knew each other, and life moved slowly. But beneath that calm surface, something dangerous was already settling into the ground. In the early 1970s, the town hired a local waste hauler named Russell Bliss to spray oil on the roads to keep dust down. What no one knew was that the oil was contaminated with dioxin, one of the most toxic chemicals ever created, left over from industrial waste. For years, residents walked those roads unaware. Then, animals started dying. Horses collapsed. Children became sick. It was not until the early 1980s that scientists uncovered the truth. Tests revealed extreme levels of dioxin throughout the entire town. Times Beach was declared uninhabitable almost immediately. In 1983, just days before Christmas, every resident was ordered to leave. Homes were abandoned. Lives were uprooted. By 1985, every building had been demolished, and the town was erased. Cleanup took decades and cost over $200 million. When it was finally finished, the land was reopened as Route 66 State Park, a quiet stretch of trails and green space. Today, there are no streets, no houses, and no warning signs. Only a small museum remains, telling the story of a town that vanished, not from fire or flood, but from poison.